Chapter 49, Crime of Rebellion. Everyone felt baffled at the scene. The two children were arguing a while ago with everyone watching them in enjoyment. How did the winds change and suddenly bring in the topic of the emperor? To insult the emperor, and harbor plans of rebelling was a crime which would cause the extermination of all 9 generations of one's family. How did young Master Yang not know this and proceed to insult the other party's uncle-in-law? Because Ling Tian's voice was too soft, so everyone did not hear Ling Tian saying "tell that to my aunt's husband." They only heard young noble Yang suddenly burst out scolding the other party's uncle-in-law, and even venomously so, and furthermore fluently cursing. Shit has hit the fan. Everyone present only saw the young Master Yang standing there stock still in shock. Then, the audience hurriedly moved their legs to escape. Are you kidding me? In just a blink of an eye, an old hen transformed into a duck. Since the tropic went to rebelling, why would the people of their caliber stay when the only option there was death? Ling Tian shifted his vision, and glanced towards Ling Yi. Ling Yi was a bodyguard of the Ling family, and also one which had constantly opposed the Yang family for many years. While he worked as a coachman on the surface, he had virtually seen all the struggles of the two families over the years. Of course, Ling Tian had to consult him to understand how he should proceed in order to reap the full benefits. Under their tacit agreement, Ling Tian suddenly jumped onto the chariot, shouting, "All are not to move. Those present here are all witnesses. If anyone dares to move, he or she will be dealt with in the same crime of rebellion. The punishment will be the extermination of your 9 generations." Once he spoke, those on the street froze like blocks of wood. Everyone had an expression of dread, with their limbs shaking as they screamed in their hearts, "Why am I so unlucky? I came here to watch a good show but got turned into a witness for a crime of rebellion. What is the reasoning behind this suffering?" Many of them secretly swore, even if there was a beautiful lady doing a striptease on the streets in future, they would not even stay there to observe. This sort of matter was death-inducing. Behind the Yang family's chariot, a servant suddenly pushed apart the crowd and sped off. In a blink of an eye not even his shadow could be seen. Obviously, he had gone back to the Yang residence to report the matter. However, Ling Tian did not even bat an eyelid, as though he had not noticed the blatant escape. He did not think that the Yang family will be destroyed by this, and only thought he could use this chance to bring the Yang's young master down a notch. Secretly throwing Ling Yi a glance, he gave a tacit signal, and Ling Yi immediately sliced off the bridle of one of the horses pulling the chariot. He then got on the horse and sped along towards the Ling residence. "Little thing, how dare you try to climb up my head? Watch how this little grandpa play you to death," Ling Tian thought to himself happily. However, his facial expression remained chilly as he scolded, "Men, what are you still waiting for? Tie them all up. No one shall be exempted." Yang Wei's pitch went up by an octave as he shouted, "You dare!" A wave of disdain surfaced in Ling Tian's heart. Waving his hands, he continued, "Anyone who resists would be considered a rebel. Kill them without mercy. Men, hurry up." "Yes." The various guards of the Ling residence shouted out their acknowledgement, pouncing towards the people like wolves and tigers. The moment they grabbed onto someone, they would first give them a good beating before tying them up. Finally the ropes ran out, and they started to take out the belts of the unfortunate victims to use as a rope. In that moment, all the Ling bodyguards were high-spirited, delightedly carrying themselves without restraint. After fighting with the Yang family for 3 decades, this was the first time they could let loose all their frustrations. How would the Yang family's bodyguard and butler know that just a single sentence from their young master would land them in such trouble? Right now, everyone was behaving similarly, not daring to move, allowing themselves to be tied up. Thinking of moving? You must be joking, it would be counted as treason. Ling Tian was completely willing to kill on the streets. Furthermore, even if they were killed, it would be just and proper and no one would say a word against him. Glancing at the audiences lying wrapped like dumplings on the floor in satisfaction, Ling Tian nodded his head. He then slowly walked in front of Yang Wei, saying, "Young Master Yang, I just thought of it, I have not asked for your name yet." Yang Wei had on a face of viciousness, coldly snorting, "Kid, don't be too happy. I won't let you go, definitely not." Ling Tian now smiled, his grin remaining on his face as he stood back up. Suddenly, he stretched out a leg, kicking him to the ground. Walking up to him, he stretched out his right leg, slowly and firmly pressing it on Yang Wei's face, viciously grinding it such that the latter's mouth was buried in the snow piled up on the street. Contemptuously laughing, he continued, "Young Master Yang, you aren't willing to let me go?" As he spoke, he slowly lifted up his leg, before placing it down. "Lift up, push down. You must know that for today's matters, even if I were to kill you right now, your grandfather would still have to personally come over to the Ling residence to thank me. Do you really think that you are some big shot?" Ha ha. Ling Tian felt as though he was basking in too much of the limelight today. In his laughter, he purposely added a touch of bossiness to it, making it look like an evildoer who had gotten what he wanted. Yang Wei's mouth was filled with soil, with muffled sounds coming from within his mouth. Upon hearing Ling Tian's cold ridicule, he finally could not resist the fear growing in his heart, and 2 streams of tears flowed out from his eyes. As he thought of the seriousness of the matter just now, he got more and more afraid. The humiliation added on was the breaking point for him, making him burst into tears. "My God! You're crying from this? How pathetic." Ling Tian slowly brought his leg down, then turned to face another bodyguard of the Yang family, smiling as he spoke, "What is the name of your young master?" Despite the cute smile on Ling Tian's face, the bodyguard felt the chills deep in his heart. He could not help but hiccup as he stuttered, "Young master's name is called Yang Wei." "Eh?" Ling Tian's mouth dropped wide open, his expression fantastic to behold. After a while, he finally could not take it any longer, bursting out into laughter. "Impotent? How could someone actually be given such a dog-shit name?" Ling Tian laughed till the tears flowed down from his face, his body racked with shivers. He was really full of respect for Yang Kong. This man, his standard at giving names was in a league of its own. From afar, the sound of frenzied horse clops sounded, and a group of people on horseback came from opposite directions, from the north and south. Both houses really live up their name of being decade-old enemies, even having such synchronization in appearing at the scene. Ling Tian mused to himself. Seeing both parties close to arriving as he glanced sideways, he immediately dived into the chariot. For the following matter, Ling Tian was not willing to stand out any further. However, the Yang family would not, even in their dreams, think that inside his chariot was still hidden another witness that could be considered a heavyweight character. That was Mr. Qin. Both families had sent out their heavyweight characters as well. On the Ling family's side, there was the Duke Ling Zan and Ling Yan's father Ling Zhou. Furthermore, there was another who came to watch the fun, the Zhou family's Zhou Fenghan. Standing beside Duke Ling was a beardless middle-aged man, who was the Ling family's chief advisor, Li Chengcheng, otherwise known as Mr. Li. When Duke Ling heard the news that Ling Tian had caught a few of the Yang family members who had showed signs of rebellion, Li Chengcheng, who had happened to be beside him, immediately thought of this as a golden opportunity to undermine the Yang family's strength. How could the latter let it go? Zhou Fenghan, who just happened to be playing chess with Ling Zan, naturally would not miss the chance for such a good show. In fact, when Zhou Fenghan heard the news, the first thought that ran through his mind was, yet another opportunity presented itself to that little devil's mouth. Similar to the Ling family, the lineup of the Yang family's members was in no way inferior. Other than the family head, Yang Kong, there was also Yang Wei's father, Yang Lei, his uncle, Yang Chen, as well as several experts and officials. It was as though they came out in full force, with all of them having flustered expressions. Looking at the bedraggled appearance of Yang Wei, all of them were brimming with fury. The audience gathered around in a huge ring. In the ring was 7 to 8 Yang family members with depressed looks, trussed up like turkeys. Every one of them even had a bright steel sword on their necks. Although Yang Wei did not have any steel sword placed on him, his face was full of mud and soil, with his hair in disarray and his body covered in filth. Because it just snowed, and the weather today was considered relatively warm, the piled-up snow started to melt. Since Yang Wei had been pushed down and stepped on by Ling Tian, he naturally took the grand prize. In Ling Tian's eyes, this young noble Yang now looked like a refugee from Africa. Chapter 50, Concrete Evidence. Yang Kankun's face turned dark as he bellowed, "What is going on?" Seeing how pitiful his grandson was, he felt a wave of heartache. "Hurry and release him." The servant who reported the matter to the family had only said that young Master Yang Wei and the young master of the Ling family had a conflict, with Ling Tian catching Yang Wei by slandering him for humiliating the emperor. Yang Kankun felt that something was wrong, but the servant just did not dare to explain the whole incident. After all, how would the mere servant dare to talk about humiliating the emperor? Thus, Yang Kankun still did not know what happened exactly and only knew that it was a serious matter, rushing over in exasperation. If Yang Wei had offended any other family, Yang Kankun could not be bothered with it. But the moment he heard that the Ling family was the other party, he had no choice but to make a personal appearance. Wait. Seeing how the people of the Yang family actually ignored everyone around and wanted to free Yang Wei, Ling Zan roared, "It is best for us to clarify what happened first before doing anything." Yang Kankun retorted, "Old man Ling, the one being tied up is my grandson." What he meant was, he isn't your grandson, obviously you don't feel the heartache. Ling Zan replied coldly, "I know he does not have the surname Ling. But, he will not die even if he is tied up for a while more." Yang Kankun trembled in anger and managed to barely suppress his anger after taking a few deep breaths. All of a sudden, there was the sound of horses accompanied by flurried footsteps approaching from the east as a squadron of guards dressed in armor approached. The capital law enforcement squadron. The Yang family stared at them until their eyeballs almost fell off. The Capital Law Enforcement Squadron was a special force in the capital and can be said to be the most powerful force entity apart from the regular force. Their combat prowess was even stronger than the regular army. Ever since this squadron was founded, it has always been in the control of the imperial family. Towards the various powers and government officials in the capital, it carried a strong sense of intimidation. Everyone from the Ling family then revealed a delighted look as Yang Kankun turned his head around. What exactly happened? His hands stretched out as he grabbed the fat driver and brought the driver to his side. The fat driver explained the whole event with a depressed expression. However, even he did not hear what Ling Tian said, which caused Yang Wei to scold Ling Tian's uncle-in-law. Since Yang Kankun was the one interrogating him, he could only reply honestly about how the young master was the one who began scolding Ling Tian's uncle-in-law. Yang Kankun took a deep breath of cold air. This matter can be big or small depending on the situation. If the Ling family insists that Yang Wei insulted the emperor, this grandson of his is finished for sure. Yang Kankun was both angered and frustrated as he stepped on Yang Wei. "Are you an idiot? He dug such an obvious trap for you and you jumped into it without hesitation? He has his uncle-in-law, don't you have one too? Both of your uncle-in-laws are the same person. Bastard." Yang Kankun was angered by his grandson to the point he went silly. Yang Wei scolded Ling Tian's uncle-in-law? Isn't that the same as scolding his own uncle-in-law? Yang Kankun also felt that there was definitely something that was wrong in this incident. Although Yang Wei was not extremely bright, he wasn't so stupid either. There must definitely be a hidden explanation behind this. An official from the Capital Law Enforcement Squadron then walked over with a cold expression. "What is going on here?" "Ah. Elder Ling? Elder Yang? What are you two elders doing here?" The second half of his sentence was filled with shock. Ling Tian then laughed as he said, "This old man heard that there was a madman here who dared to humiliate the emperor in public. In a fit of rage, this old man came to take a look." That official then paid his compliments to the different people present before walking to the center and asking, "What is going on here?" In fact, he was also extremely worried in his heart. While the capital law enforcement squadron belonged to the imperial family and had a high status, the two people here were not figures that he could offend. Even if they would not want to offend the capital law enforcement squadron, it was nothing difficult for them to deal with a small officer like him. As he saw that both Ling Tian and Yang Konkun was present, he was completely filled with regret. This was obviously a conflict between both their families, and even the emperor would not be able to diffuse it so easily, much less him. He then began to search within the crowd as he thought to himself, "FK. Where did that fellow who gave me the news disappear to? If this daddy here sees him, I will definitely shred him into pieces." From the Ling family carriage, which did not move for a long time, an old man who was holding the hand of a little boy suddenly came out from within. His face was lean as his beard reached his chest. "Ha ha ha, why not you ask this old man?" This old man had been here all this while and had witnessed the whole incident. Besides, there are over hundreds of people here who can be the witness to this event as well. If this old man is unfair with my words, there will naturally be someone from the crowd to step out and disagree with me. The moment Yang Konkun saw that he was the one stepping out from the carriage, Yang Konkun felt his head go into a whirl. Why is it him? Things are now bad. If he is the one who planned it all, this wouldn't be surprising. Mr. Ken had always been indifferent to fame and fortune, and did not have any government posts. However, his reputation in the world was unrivaled. Together with him being a teacher for many years, he has many talented students all over the world. Even in the current ministerial court, there were many officials who were once under Mr. Ken's tutelage. A few days ago, Yang Konkun heard that Ling Tian personally invited Mr. Ken into the Ling family to be the teacher of Ling Tian. Yang Konkun never imagined that this old man would come out right at this crucial period of time. In front of both the family heads and the capital law enforcement squadron, Mr. Ken repeated the whole incident truthfully. Even the words which Yang Wei used were recited out by him word for word without concealing it in the slightest. Mr. Ken always had an extremely good reputation. Together with the fact that what he said was completely truthful, everyone understood what happened after a short explanation. Yang Konkun's face turned paler and paler as he heard the story, to the point his face was completely white when the story ended. He had originally felt the matter to be extremely strange. This meeting was obviously coincidental, yet it was made use of so perfectly by someone, forcing his Yang family into a corner. The intricate calculations, sharp foresight and powerful means were also baffling. Even if someone were to beat Yang Konkun to death, he would never believe that the whole affair today was planned out by the mischievous brat of the Ling family. Only after he saw Mr. Ken did Yang Konkun felt like his doubts were answered. So it was this old man who was controlling the scenes from the back. It is no wonder that my Yang family suffered such a great loss this time. With Yang Wei's pitiful intellect, he completely lacked any form of flexibility. Together with this sly and cunning old man and how sudden this matter was, it was no surprise that Yang Wei fell for Mr. Kin's plans. After Yang Konkun saw Mr. Kin, he inevitably shoved all of the responsibility for the matters today onto him. In that instant, a vicious glare filled his eyes as he stared at Mr. Kin while thinking to himself, "Darn old thing. I did not place you in my sights initially. But I never thought that you would help the Ling family. Taking the initiative to attack? Ha ha ha, let us wait and see. In this capital, the Ling family is not the only one here." Yang Wei's father, Yang Lei, felt that the matters were becoming more and more disadvantageous for his son and could not help but retort, "The young master of the Ling family had always been arrogant and conceited. Who in the capital does not know that? This matter may be started by Ling Tian, forcing my son, Yang Wei, to retaliate. It is all within reason. Everyone then turned to look at Ling Tian, whose hand was being held by Mr. Qin. His eyes was still filled with tears, as his eyes were red, obviously crying before this. Currently, his eyes were still looking around anxiously as his body retreated behind Mr. Qin. It was obvious that Ling Tian was extremely frightened. Such a child would start this matter? You're still slandering him? Everyone present came to an immediate conclusion. The young master of the Yang family was definitely the one who bullied Ling Tian, but had accidentally have a slip of his tongue? After all, for a 13-year-old teen to fight a 5-year-old child, everyone did not need to think to guess what the result would be. Looking at Ling Tian's pitiful appearance, looking as though he would cry at any moment, all of the senior present could not help but want to hug and console him. They had all came to a conclusion in their hearts that the Yang family went too far this time. They had actually sent a 13-year-old teen to bully a 5-year-old child. As they all understood what was going on, everyone present were kept behind as witnesses. The victim of the incident also gave his statement of what happened, and there was concrete evidence. The faces of those from the Yang family turned ashen. Chapter 51, Truth. At this point, young Master Yang finally had a chance to speak. After furiously spitting out the mud inside his mouth, he shouted, "It's that little bastard who is setting me up, I'm innocent." He barely got the sentence out before he was viciously slapped by the ashamed Yang Kongkun, who shouted back, "Shut your mouth." Ling Zhou's eyes were suffused with coldness, which everyone could see. To think that jerk dared to call my son a little bastard. Such a humiliation. To think he dared to be so unbridled even after carrying such a heavy crime. Ling Zhou could not help but want to step in, to teach him a lesson. Yang Kongkun stood ramrod straight in front of his grandson, saying, "Although things have come to such a stage, all of us have only heard one side of the story. Doesn't everyone want to hear the other party explain themselves?" Standing by the side, Li Zhengchong guffawed heartily, saying, "It doesn't matter what young Master Yang says regarding this sort of matter. However, if Sire Yang is not resigned to this fact, you can let your grandson speak out, there's no harm in doing so." Li Zhengchong realized that the Yang family would be in quite a predicament this time round, and he could not help but feel amazed in his heart. This was an originally minor incident, of two children from opposing families arguing. However, under some premeditated guidance, what was originally chicken feed evolved into something which involved all levels of the imperial court, thoroughly putting the Yang family in an embarrassing spot. In particular, the person's ability to grasp the opportune timing, and his judgment was impeccably accurate, leading to such an astonishing scene. The most wonderful part of this was not the fact that Yang Wei was set up, but rather in which the timing was so precisely calculated that both the Yang and Ling families' reinforcements arrived at the exact same time. This was totally mind-blowing. One must know that if any of the families had arrived earlier than the other, the end result would not be like this. If the Yang family were to arrive first, then they would disperse the crowd of witnesses at the first instant and save their people. Only then would they formulate their counterattack. If the Ling family were to arrive first, the Yang family would also have an excuse, saying that all these witnesses were planted by the Ling family deliberately. The Ling family might even be marked with bogus accusations. However, now that both the families had arrived at the same time despite the distance being substantially different, the situation had also become more complex. Right now, both families did not dare to ask the witnesses to disperse in order to deal with this situation. The moment one side opened their mouth, it would mean giving the other party an excuse to strike, and say that the offending party had a guilty conscience. As such, either family could use such a scenario to turn the tables onto the other. And the most crucial factor was that even the capital law enforcement squadron was also called over. The moment the law enforcement squadron had heard that there was someone showing signs of rebellion as well as insulting the emperor, they immediately rushed to the scene, attempting to try and net some merit. However, it was unfortunate that they ended up as a pincushion against the fights of the two great families. If the law enforcement squadron had not appeared, both families would have brought their people back and forgot about this matter after fighting for a few rounds. Even if both families were to flip the skies upside down, the imperial family would still adopt the position of a bystander and not get involved, waiting for reap the benefits of both families' weakening. However, now that the team representing the imperial authority had already awkwardly inserted themselves into this matter, that former idea obviously would not work anymore. At this juncture, the only solution to this seemed to be to report the matter to the emperor, and await his judgment. However, the fact that Yang Wei had blatantly insulted the emperor meant that he would not be able to escape punishment. One of them was viciously scolding, while the other trying his best to defend the name. Both families were poles apart. At this juncture, which family the emperor would lean towards was obvious at a glance. No matter how this matter was settled, it was undeniable that the Ling family would gain the upper hand. Not only would they win the lawsuit, they would also receive the emperor's favor as well as his reward. On the other hand, even if Yang Wei would be given grace, and stop the pursuit of this matter, Yang Wei's life would already be considered finished due to this tiny incident. Not only did the Yang family have to swallow all these pent-up grievances, they had to swallow them with joyous expressions on the surface with half a word of complaint. If they wanted to seek revenge from the Ling family, they could only do so discreetly and not out in the open. However, both families were already locked in constant strife with each other, so why would the Ling family be afraid of this revenge from the Yang family? Expert. To be able to extrapolate such a trivial matter into such a heaven-defying result, this could only be the work of gods or devils. Upon realizing all this, the head advisor, Li Changcheng, had a face full of reverence. As though he was witnessing the first rays of sunlight on top of a tall mountain, he looked at Mr. Qin. Though this fellow seemed to be law-abiding and scholarly, no one would have imagined that beneath this restrained appearance was someone who was bold and shrewd. One indeed cannot judge a book by its cover. No one would even imagine, let alone believe, that this matter was actually orchestrated by the teary-eyed, gutless child standing by the side. At this moment, Yang Wei was narrating the whole process in which the argument had developed. Then he said he was going to tell his aunt's husband about this, and let him take care of me. So I just. Saying up till here, he secretly lifted up his head to see his grandfather's expression, and tactfully did not continue talking. Thankfully, Yang Kongkong did not die from anger from this. Yang Kongkong repeatedly cursed in his heart, "How could I have such a idiotic grandson? You would be better off not speaking in this case." In his heart, he had already understood what exactly happened. In a verbal exchange, it would be natural for one's tongue to inadvertently slip. If it were a normal person, that would be the end of it. However, the person in question was Ling Tian. The aunt's husband that Ling Tian had brought out was someone not in the capacity of Yang Wei to even criticize. All the surrounding audience all felt the same way. If a child was being bullied, he would naturally look for an adult to protect him. As to why Ling Tian had mentioned his uncle-in-law, it was a matter of fact. In every child's heart, only the mightiest adult would have the capability to help and protect him. In Ling Tian's case, among all the people he knew, the first person in his mind would definitely be the emperor. This also meant that the emperor, to Ling Tian, was a figure he respected and was close to. Thus, Yang Wei's retaliatory sentence not only sealed his fate, but also increased Ling Tian's reputation in the eyes of the emperor. When the crowd separates, word of this would spread to the emperor's ears, and his impression of the Ling family would also improve by a few points. One would definitely think, why would such a small child like Ling Tian be able to speak of asking his uncle-in-law for help? It could only be that their family teachings were good. Furthermore, this would speak volumes about the loyalty of the Ling family towards the emperor. It was the combination of all these factors that made Yang Kongkong nearly faint from the anger. Such a small matter was reflected into such a big problem, and could even result in long-term repercussions. If one were to manipulate it properly, this would be enough to determine the success and failure of both the families. The crowd were not fools. After pondering for a while, they could not help but show a change in their expressions. In that instant, it was as if all of them were suffering from suffocation, and they collectively sucked in a long breath of cold air. The suction was so great it was as if the entire street had turned into a vacuum in that very moment. As the commander of the law enforcement squadron, Wan Shifeng, saw how the matters had already progressed to such a stage, he could only prudently observe Yang Kong's expression as he suggested, "This matter is out of this small one's jurisdiction. Might I suggest that the two sires instead pay a visit to the emperor, and seek divine judgment?" The crowd remained silent. At this point, who could not guess what the emperor would say and deal with this matter? What so-called divine judgment was all a formality. However, the solution that Wan Shifeng suggested was the only plausible route to take in order to solve this problem. Even though both Ling Tian and Yang Kong possessed enough manpower to overflow the heavens in their lifetime, they did not have the ability to resolve this problem amicably. The two old fellows exchanged a glance. One of them had an expression full of glee, while the other was angered beyond words, with a depressed expression. Both nodded their heads at the same time. Zhou Fenghan only hid behind Ling Tian from start to the end, coldly watching on as a bystander. Having suffered from a disadvantage before, he naturally could tell with a glance that this matter was, without doubt, another masterpiece created by that little demon. To think he could still reveal such a pitiful look to win the audience's pity. Today's matter did not just severely wound the Yang family, it also greatly boosted the development of the Ling family. The ingenious part of this was that Ling Tian's escaped from the spotlight the moment Mr. Qin stepped out of the carriage. Thus, Ling Tian managed to continue concealing himself, with the brunt of the impact being taken by Mr. Qin. Such a brilliant plan. The more Zhou Fenghan evaluated the successes and failures of this plan, the more he felt as though that pitiful child had an intellect that was as deep as the ocean, vast and unfathomable. He could only suck in a breath of air, and once more seriously reconsider his viewpoint of Ling Tian. As he focused on Ling Tian, he saw Ling Tian turn his head towards him, the corners of his mouth rising upwards in a crafty smile. Chapter 52, Ambush. The emperor's decision was extremely swift and wise. He commanded Yang Kong to take his grandson back and discipline him well. Not only did he not punish him, he rewarded him with 10 taels of gold. He then comforted Yang Kong in an amiable manner. "These are all just words spoken by kids. Rebellion? Ha ha ha, isn't this just a joke? Are both your elders here to crack a joke with us?" This was what the emperor said. In fact, it had a subtle meaning of, "There is no need for you to trouble me just because of this small incident." It was as though the emperor was completely unbothered by this affair. He then commanded Ling Tian to bring his grandson back and raise him up well. At the same time, he rewarded him with 10 taels of gold and a piece of white ureshii, saying that it was to calm the child down. Before he sent them away, he also added casually, "Oh, my consort had told us that she has not visited her relatives for a long time and wanted to make a trip home." Apart from that, he did not say anything else. Both the old men took their grandsons out of the palace together. One of them filled with black lines all over his forehead, together with a vicious glare in his eyes as though he wanted to eat someone up alive. Another one was filled with smiles and in an extremely good mood. Although the emperor did not say much, he revealed his stand by consoling Yang Kong. In this whole incident, it was obvious that Ling Tian was the one being bullied and the Ling family was the party which needed consoling. However, the emperor did not say anything to the Ling family but consoled the party who was the perpetrator. This was where it was strange. Especially in Yang Kong's heart, it was completely filled with a myriad of mixed feelings. How was it possible for the sly and wise Yang Kong to not notice something strange? He thought in his heart, "He consoled me, but gave him an extra white ureshii. What does the ureshii means? It obviously means that what the Ling family did was to his liking. In other words, he wasn't pleased with what my Yang family did. The more he thought about it, the more unpleasant he felt. If the daughter of the Ling family wants to go back to visit them, why did you have to say it in front of me? When they were leaving the palace, Yang Wei's triangular eyes glared at Ling Tian viciously. However, Ling Tian ignored him completely as he thought to himself, "Child, you're too soft. You're still far from fighting with me." Duke Ling left the palace in a merry mood, letting Ling Tian ride on top of his shoulders while calling Ling Tian his darling. It was as though he had completely forgotten about how Ling Tian had caused the Zhou family to reject the marriage. Under Ling Tian's insistence, Ling Tian had still followed Mr. Ken out to visit his friend. It was just that the time was delayed by a whole afternoon. Ling Tian sat on the carriage with a smile as he looked at the brilliant look on Mr. Ken's face as though he was laughing at Mr. Ken's misfortune. Mr. Ken was now extremely depressed. The whole incident was caused by Ling Tian, and it was also Ling Tian's idea which guaranteed them the greatest benefits. From the beginning till the end, he had not done anything and only sat in the carriage. But in the end, he became the biggest contributor to the whole event. Duke Ling almost wanted to worship him. As for those top officials who were usually extremely proud and aloof, they looked at him like a teacher respectfully, treating him as though it was all part of his divine planning. If he had really played such a role, he wouldn't be bothered by it. But the thing is, he was receiving credit for something he did not do. With Mr. Ken's rigid and upright character, not only is this not considered glory, it was considered a torture for him. In a mere few hours, Mr. Ken was already exhausted. He then quickly took his leave as he literally escaped from the Ling mansion, allowing him to have the time to wipe off the sweat on his face. At the moment, he saw that the mastermind of this whole incident was laughing at his misfortune. In a moment of rage, he did not bother about anything else and caught Ling Tian over, wanting to give him a good smacking on the ass. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, Ling Tian quickly said with a doubtful tone, "The matters today are extremely strange. There is something that I just cannot figure out." As Ling Tian said that, he scratched his head with a doubtful look on his face. Mr. Ken's hands almost landed, but he heard this sudden phrase from Ling Tian. He then could not help but ask, "What do you not understand?" At the same time, he thought to himself, "There is still something that you don't understand? Then it must really be something big." In that instant, his anger had completely dissipated from a single question by Ling Tian. Ling Tian laughed in his heart as he got up from Mr. Ken's knees and said, "The more I think about it, the more I don't understand. Strictly speaking, this is the first time I am leaving the city ever since I was born. But in this very first time, I coincidentally met the young master of the Yang family to fight with me over the road. Isn't this too much of a coincidence?" Mr. Ken was first stunned before asking nervously, "You're trying to say that there is a spy in the mansion? This is definitely something big." Ling Tian almost burst out into laughter as he thought to himself, "If this was something pre-planned by the Yang family, how would it be possible for me to gain the upper hand so easily? Furthermore, they definitely would not send an idiot like Yang Wei over." But his face was completely still as he continued to spout rubbish. Perhaps he was just too good at speaking, making Mr. Ken extremely serious as he twiddled with his beard in deep thought. Ling Tian was still seated down in the carriage and did not seem to hear anything the both of them said. However, a trace of laughter in his eyes proved that he understood Ling Tian's intent. Following the respectful greetings from the city guards, the carriage exited the city and headed to the south. In the front was the Green Willow Lake. In the willow forest, there was a small river which was about 20 feet wide. The surface of the river was already frozen and it looked like a beautiful white jade path which spread it across the earth silently. Opposite the river, there was a rundown house which was King Fu's courtyard. Ling Tian stuck his head out of the carriage as he looked at the large willow forest with ridicule. If I am not wrong, Ling Kong will make use of this opportunity to get rid of me. This would be the best time. The carriage moved slowly on the surface of the ground as it let out a creaking sound. The guards surrounded the left and right of the carriage as they looked to the surroundings carefully while slowly approaching the willow forest. All of a sudden, a whistle sounded as dozens of white-dressed men with bows and swords jumped out from the forest. In a blink of an eye, they were a mere 300 feet away from the carriage. The person leading the group then waved his hands as he commanded, "Attack! Kill them all and leave no one alive." With a swooshing sound, dozens of arrows with steel tips shot over like locusts in the skies. The tip of the arrows had a blue gleam to them, obviously being smeared with poison. Chapter 53, Fierce Battle. "Protect the young master," Ling Yi shouted as he jumped in front of the carriage and pulled out his blade. With 2 swings of the blade, he blocked 2 arrows flying towards him. The Ling family guards were all seasoned in battle and hand-picked from the elites from the army. They would naturally not place a mere arrow barrage such as this in their sights. A few of them guarded the front of the carriage with the blades in their hands brandishing to deflect all of the poisonous arrows. There were a few arrows which could not have been avoided. However, right before the arrow hit the guards, it suddenly lost its aim and landed off the mark. There was actually not a single arrow which landed on the guards. As Ling Tian sat in the carriage, he held onto a small stone in his hands with an evil smirk on his face. There were at least 50 to 60 of these men dressed in white, at least twice the number of guards Ling Tian had. Furthermore, they were all well trained in martial arts with an exquisite blade technique. The moment they engaged in close quarters, the guards of the Ling family could no longer defend against them and a few of them began to get injured. Ling Yi was startled. He quickly waved his blade to force the enemy in front of him away as he shouted, "Ling I will take a few men to block them. Quickly take the young master away." The white-dressed men then sneered, "Leave? Where will you run to? It's best you all go see Hades together." Ling Yi was enraged as he pounced forward while brandishing his blade. The both of them then began to engage in a fierce battle. In the carriage, Ling Tian rolled his eyeballs as he mumbled, "I've asked you guys to not call me young master, not call me young master. You guys just won't listen and are still calling me that. Damn it." Mr. Qin was frightened to the point his face turned pale. After he heard Ling Tian picking on his guards over such a matter at a time like this, Mr. Qin did not know whether to laugh or cry. The white-dressed men had forced the 20 to 30 guards of Ling Tian to a corner as the remaining people charged by the side of the carriage. The man leading the charge then slashed downwards and sliced off the curtain covering the curtains, revealing the old and young men inside. The man then laughed out loud, "Kill them all." Behind him, all of the men in white gave a war cry as they charged forward together. But just at this moment, the situation changed. In the carriage by the side, more than 10 men jumped out of it all of a sudden. They were all dressed in full black with even their faces being black. After they jumped out, they did not say a thing but their blades stabbed out in unison. A few shrieks then sounded as 3 men in white had blood spewing out of their chest and falling down on the floor. The drops of blood colored the snow-white ground, as though the grounds was filled with blossom flowers. The glares of these few men were extremely cold as they had a pressing and cold aura. That was the bloodthirsty aura that was born from the battlefield, an aura filled with killing intent. The man leading the white-dressed men then cried out in dismay, "Not good, it's Ling Zhou's Blood Iron warriors. This is a trap. We encountered an ambush, retreat." One of the warrior then pulled out his blood-stained blade from the chest of the white-dressed men as he face contorted into a malicious glare, "Leave? Leave your life behind first." He then swung his blades as he charged forward like a tiger. The white-dressed men gave a whistle as they escaped in all direction. Ling Tian had always been sitting in the carriage. Seeing that the white-dressed men, his eyes flashed. "If I were to really let you escape, then wouldn't I have let down this wonderful gift which Ling Kong had gave me after such careful planning? His hands then hid in his sleeves as stones flew out of them without any signs. The stones carried with them a large force and they landed right on the men dressed in white. Most of them hit right at the back of their knees. Only after the stones landed was one able to hear the sound of the stones breaking through the air. It was more than enough to tell just how powerful these stones were and just how fast they were. The men who were escaping felt a sudden pain in their knees as they tripped for no reason. The Blood Iron warriors actually ignored the men on the floor and only gave chase to all those who have escaped. There were a few of them who even charged towards the direction where Ling Yi was fighting. Their eyes flashed with excitement as though killing was the only thing that could entertain them in this world. Ling Tian rolled his eyes, not grasping those opportunities. Bunch of idiots. Ling then sprinted over with the guards as he shouted from afar, young master, are you alright? Ling Tian was enraged, almost wanting to send him flying with a single kick. His face turned black as he screamed, don't call me young master. Ling touched his forehead in embarrassment. This young master really has a strange temper, bothering about such a thing at a time like this. Ling Tian then rolled his eyes, what are you guys still waiting for? Tie all of these men who are on the floor up. Ling Yi then walked over with a few Blood Iron warriors. His shoulder was bleeding from a slash as he grit his teeth in pain. There were a total of 56 men who attacked them. 19 of them were killed on the spot and 24 were captured while the rest escaped. Only one of the Blood Iron warriors had a light injury on his arm and the rest of them were uninjured. There were more than 10 injuries among Ling Tian's guards and 3 of them died from battle. Thankfully, most of the injuries were pretty light and would not hinder their movements. There was only one who had been stabbed in the chest and had a serious injury. Ling Tian then walked in front of him to check on his wounds. Shortly after, he could not help but shake his head. Such a big bloody hole on his chest. This is beyond saving already. With guilt in his heart, Ling Tian took a knee as he asked softly, I am the young noble, do you have any other final requests? Tell me and I will complete it for you. That man then stuttered as blood flowed out from his mouth continuously, blocking his throat. It was obvious that he was unable to speak anymore. He looked towards Ling Tian with his eyes in disorder and a deep sense of concern with a tinge of anxious appeal. Ling Tian then turned his head and said softly, rest in peace, I will take care of your family. A shimmer of light then shined through his eyes as he tried to move his lips. It was as though he had said thank you, but it was barely audible. Ling Tian then stood up and faced the skies as he ordered, Linger. Linger stepped forward and said, your subordinate is here. Ling Tian then ordered without looking back, take out your blade. Send this brother on his way. Linger became startled as his body trembled to the point he almost collapsed on the floor. He then gave a loud cry, no. He can still be saved. I can't. Tears rolled down his eyes. As the Blood Iron warriors heard what Ling Tian said, astonishment filled their eyes as they looked towards Ling Tian with understanding. In the battlefield, if a comrade suffered from fatal wounds, the best choice would be to end his misery with a blade. This is the most honorable death for a warrior. They all felt it to be strange, if they were to meet with such a thing, it was only natural for them to handle the situation as such. However, it was Ling Tian's first time handling such a matter and he was actually able to make such a resolute decision. This made them all surprised. A Blood Iron warrior then stepped forward and said, I'll do it. He then squatted beside the guard and used his left hands to cover his eyes. With a heavy mood, he said, brother. Rest in peace.